Join the Betamax Video Club. We wind back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented Heartbreak Ridge. Watching with me is Simon Smith, who's Simon from Harlow on Twitter. Hi Simon, how are you?
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for bringing your battered Betamax copy of Heartbreak Ridge. It was a treat. This is Clint's debut on the Video Club. What's so special about this film for you?
A couple of things really. This is the first film I was able to rent from the video shop that was a 15, where I was 15 and able to go in and get it. And of course it's Clint, being Clint in a Clint film where he is quintessentially Clint.
He didn't write the theme tune, sing the theme tune.
It often feels like he did.
I mean, we talked about this off air. You were in the army sort of a while ago.
Yes.
When you watch this now through your military eyes, how does that feel?
Watching anything military for me is difficult because I'm always going to be looking to pick holes in it and say, well, that wouldn't have happened. What's great about this film is there's so much in it that did, with regards to soldiers that can't find their equipment, soldiers that get stood to for an engagement only to be stood down. But yeah, there's a lot in it. This was a big favourite in the block. Everybody loves this because of Clint and the T-shirts and everything that goes with it.
I mean, we talked about this. I mean, I've mentioned before, I'm a police officer, and when I was at training school, Full Metal Jacket was very much the film that seemed to come through, and we all were following while we were there, which, let's be honest, was nothing like Full Metal Jacket. But I mean, watching this one now through those eyes and through that, I mean, tell us some of the things that, I mean, we'll come to it throughout the movie, but some of the things that made you sit there and think almost nostalgic for the army.
Oh, I don't think much, mate. I don't think being a soldier for Clint would have made me nostalgic for the army. I think he's like he's like a throwback to a time even before I was in. I think that it's the camaraderie. It's recon platoon. They didn't, in order to make Clint look better in this, all of his charges, all of his soldiers are inferior to him. So you've got a Ponte and Profile and people like that looked and acted like my mates and were as crapper soldiers as we were. So you kind of hark for a time where Clint would have whipped us all into shape.
I mean, the premise of this movie is quite, if you take out the army side, it could be quite generic 80s film of any kind, really. You've got essentially this highly decorated hero of the Korean War who's got a few years left to go in his service, and he's sent back to virtually his old digs to... He's not even a trainer or an instructor, is he? He's just kind of a...
No, he gets to go back to his unit. He's been kind of ghosted out to supply because he punched an officer. So the film starts with him in a drunk tank in jail, and he gets sent back to his old unit to whip a ragtag platoon into shape. But like you say, it's a typical 80s premise in that only this man from this period of time could possibly do this.
Yeah, and it's the generation gap. You know, he's I suppose he wouldn't be in his 50s.
Yeah, so if Thomas Highway is mirroring Clint, who was born in 1930, he's 56, and he reckons he's got 25 plus, and we know that before he joined the Marines that he was in the army.
Yeah.
So that's another interesting thing, because the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge was a real battle in October 1951 in Korea, which would have made Clint 21 if he'd have served in that. But the Marines weren't engaged with the Chinese and North Koreans at Heartbreak Ridge, so they kind of had to retcon this because they researched the film for an army sergeant, a wizened old army sergeant, and the Department of Defence read the scripts and said, no, we're not going to support you. So the Marines, with a few script changes and some begging from Clint, agreed. So they had to then leave the premise that Chuzu and Highway were in the army before they joined the Marines, and they kind of explained that very quickly in the bar halfway through.
It's like something out of a Star Wars film.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. This happened, but we'll just build this around it, and basically we'll just get Clint to shout at some more recruits, and it'll be fine.
I mean, I love the fact we talked about it. Essentially opens in a drunk tank. This is very much a similar scene to Death Wish 3. You know, Clint's sitting there telling an old war story, and in his case, it actually is a war story. He's in custody for pissing on a police car and drunk and disorderly. And the biggest typical jailhound is sitting in there and calls him all the names under the sun. Was it? He says, I'm going to order me some faggot.
I'm going to carve me some faggot wings.
Very 80s language going on there.
Yeah.
And this guy must be 20 stone plus, you know, typical bald. And as we discussed, he's just got a lock knife in his shorts or whatever.
He basically looks like somebody that Clint hadn't punched in every which way but loose. That's just been parachuted into this particular drunk tank. If he had a German helmet and an orangutan outside, it wouldn't have surprised me in the slightest.
And you got Clint, who's looking very lean and everything, but again, probably still half the size of this guy. Doesn't take him very long to get his way through here, and literally carries on his story as though he never left. And
do they? I mean, I don't know much about the American penal system, but do they let you in drunk tanks with massive, great cigars and lighters to smoke after you've punched out somebody with a lock knife?
I guess by the looks of the police who turned up to watch him get sentenced, they weren't the most professional outfit in the world.
No.
I can imagine the searching that probably still goes on now. I dread to think where he kept that lock knife. Yes. Moving on. He got fined $100 for drunk and disorderly. So the judge was giving him his last chance and taking his sterling military record into account, and still giving him a conviction. So, but yeah, he even managed to get was it a "your mum" or "your old lady" joke to the court.
Yeah, there was the policeman follows him out the court and says, the next time you pee on my squad car, I'll, $100 fine, that's an insult. I don't give any serviceman's discount. And Eastwood gets to come back with a wonderful put down, too bad your old lady does. And then there's a hold me back, two police officers on a hold me back moment as he tries to get hold of him. And then he goes back to his unit where he's called in to an office with his commanding officer, who chews him out and then basically tells him, be careful what you wish for, because you've got your transfer back to your original unit and you're going home.
Now, we talked about this. This has a couple of connections to one of our favourite films, Licence to Kill.
Yeah.
That was Heller from Licence to Kill, wasn't it? His commanding officer there.
Yeah. It was Heller, wasn't it? The guy with the Stinger missiles who gets killed by the forklift truck.
Yeah.
So there's two Licence to Kill baddies in this.
Yeah, because he was here, and then we're jumping ahead very slightly. We'll come back, but the major of his new unit or his old unit is Kilifer from Licence to Kill, who's the guy who basically
takes Robert Darby's $2 million to betray Felix.
Yeah, so nice little link there, and we know that he's a wrong un anyway, as we'll find out throughout.
But I see, up until this week, when I watched both films, Licence to Kill and Heartbreak Ridge, a million times, I never realised that Powers and Kilifer were the same actor until I actually bothered to look it up, and then realised that Everett McGill would play both. And then it's so obvious when it's pointed out to you, but he basically only ever plays Powers or Kilifer in anything, like the smarmy, no good, bitter and wizened sort of commanding officer or police officer.
Yeah. It's just a shame he doesn't meet his end in this film by Timothy Dalton throwing a suitcase of money at him.
No, and eating, but there could have been a shark in the bear pit. That would have been quite an interesting turn of events.
And as Clint is on his way to his old unit, and I guess they weren't going to be using sort of flights or anything else. He has to get a cross-country bus.
Like a Greyhound. Yeah, there's a lovely establishing shot of him set in dress uniform on a coach, which I thought was a bit odd. I thought he'd travel in fatigues, but there you go. Yeah. He's reading women's magazines on the coach.
And this is a recurring thing that we see throughout the film. And of course, this is mid-50s Clint. He's got to have the backstory. It's not just about his time in the military. And as Stitch Jones, as we led to meet, Mario Van Peebles, comes across, and we sit there, he comes across, we sees Clint, or Tom Highway. I've written Clint down for all these.
Yeah, he's basically Clint. We'll just call him Clint. We'll call him Clint for the whole thing.
He sees Clint on the bus in full gear, and like you said, he's not in civvies or anything else. He's in,
Well, this is the suspension of disbelief for me, because if Mario Van Peebles is a corporal in the US Marines, and you get on a bus to travel long distance back to your barracks after doing a gig that didn't quite work out, the one seat that you're not going to sit in and try and steal a beer is the one next to the highly decorated Marine whose medal ribbons you would immediately recognise as someone you wouldn't want to sit next to. But he does. And of course, we don't know Jones is a Marine at this point. No. We just think he gets accused of being a hippie, doesn't he?
What was his name? The Ayatollah
of rock and roller. Yeah. The Duke of Funk, the Earl of Funk, the Duke of Cool.
It's very much a Apollo Creed's a wannabe type, all those nicknames. Because he had, again, it's something we see throughout the film, he has the medal ribbons,
quite prominent, sat on a coach reading a woman's magazine.
And even people throughout the film who are, if not more senior than him, certainly more senior than Stitch Jones, they take a second double glance at his medal ribbons and go, whoa.
Well, he's a Congressional Medal of Honor winner, which is the highest military decoration. It's like the Victoria Cross in the UK. So it's the highest military decoration. And even when Eastwood's in fatigues in this film, he's got the CMH sort of the golden. The ident that he's a Medal of Honor winner. Chuzu makes the point later on in the film at the party that he loves the way that the senior brass snap to attention whenever they see that little medal, and that obviously affects everybody senior to Clint except Powers, who hates him on sight because he's a throwback.
When Clint/Tom gets back to the old, and well, actually I've kind of skipped over this because there is the scene where Stitch and Clint go for a meal.
Yeah, they go for breakfast, don't they? Having there's a great line that's before that when he sits down to him on the coach, where we know where Clint's going with this character because he tries to sort of ponce a beer off him, and he says you can have one for free if it will shut the hole under your nose, which I think is a great line and is delivered perfectly by Eastwood in that sort of drawl that we get throughout this whole film.
One of those would sure go down nice, man. Well, I'd buy one from you, but I don't have my plastic. Usually I just dispense one of my newer slackies to do my beer.
You can have one for free if that'll shut the hole under your nose.
Ah, thank you, my friend. Jones.
This doesn't mean you can blow in my ear, Tom Highway.
And this is Clint is very gruff. He's not as eloquent as perhaps he was in the earlier films, but he's so good at getting his point across.
You're not sure where he's got because he's got that voice throughout the whole. Every bit of dialogue's delivered with that really gruff, half whispered voice.
Yeah.
And he sticks with it throughout the whole movie.
And it seems to work, and I think it makes those lines even more menacing.
Yeah.
But and he goes for. They stop off on the coach. They go for breakfast with Stitch, and Stitch tries to set him up with a waitress.
Well, the waitress has got a fondness for Highway.
Yeah.
And again, Clint retcons something. He says he won't talk about how he got his medals. Yeah. But we've already seen him in the drunk tank doing exactly that. So Stitch stitches Clint up by letting him go to the bathroom and then saying that if she wants to hear the war stories, that the bathroom's where the sun doesn't shine. So the waitress goes off to chase Clint into the bathroom.
Unbuttons her top.
In readiness of a bit of Clint action, which Clint's obviously written in for himself. And then Stitch nicks his Greyhound ticket, jumps on the coach, because obviously he didn't have any money to get any further than where they'd stopped. And we don't think we're going to see him again.
Yeah, because I think they'd already had the establishing shot where Stitch had got on the bus with a couple of dollar bills or something. To how far is this going to get me? It's a couple of stops.
Yeah,
and that was it. And then you get this almost obligatory scene. You get Clint running out, almost shaking his fist.
Yes.
And you got me.
Yes.
And a waitress buttoning up her blouse.
And of course, even though it's Mario Van Peebles, we think at this point we're never going to see that rock and roll star again.
Yeah, all that time they wasted introducing him and what a bad musician he is. Terrible. Clint arrives at his old/new digs, meets his mate from years ago.
Yeah, this is the first appearance of Chuzu. I love Chuzu in this film. And I can't find any information about the actor that plays him, and he's like an Ernest Borgnine kind of character, and he's or something you could imagine Brian Dennehy playing a similar kind of role, and he's really good casting because he is like a typical sort of gruff WO2 that you would find in that kind of position. So they sort of. You quickly establish that they start with an argument. He steals his coffee. He pours himself a coffee from his percolator, and they have a little row. And then you quickly realise that these two are really old pals.
There's the glint in the eye. It almost ends with "you son of a bitch."
Yeah, and then they have to they go in and meet Killifer of Major Powers.
He's very much I suppose in a lot of 80s films it would be the dean of the university or the principal or something. He's
and they established that within a minute of introducing this character that he's going to be an arsehole and he's a dick and he hates Clint. And like Clint's record, apart from, there's a personal aspect to Powers, doesn't he? Because he explained that he got busted out of this unit for hitting one of the guys that this guy went to Annapolis, which is the American Naval Officers Academy with. So he's got it in for Highway on arrival. He doesn't know how he got. You must have pulled some strokes to get back into this unit, but you're back now and I'm going to be watching you. And you know that the main protagonist for Clint in this film is going to be Powers.
Yeah. And because it's, a lot of this film is set around the training facility. There is wartime, there is conflict later on, but most of it is generated, most of the friction is between Clint and Powers, and there is that almost.
Well, these guys aren't recruits. It's not like Full Metal Jacket, but these guys are supposed to be trained serving Marines.
Yeah.
So this is the whole bit about the recon platoon that I love, because the idea that a platoon would be left to fester with sort of no supervision, and they're all in sort of sleeveless, proper 80s, like they've just come back from a Top Gun volleyball game. So Eastwood then obviously borrows Chuzu's truck, doesn't he? Drives down to meet his new subordinates, walks into their barrack room, and it's just party zone.
Pool tables
and boogie boxes, big 80s tape decks playing music, and of course he walks in and turns it off, and then somebody walks straight past him and turns it back on. So he launches it.
It breaks quite spectacularly, but again, the people we meet, you've got the Hispanic guys, who give the immediate no habla, immediately gets his back up, and he sits there, walks in, you've got the jock with the sunglasses on, and he breaks the boombox, and then all of a sudden out comes, he breaks the pool cue.
Yeah, he gives a little monologue, doesn't he? I've drunk more beer and pissed more blood and banged more quiff than you guys put together, and I'm hard and I'm coming for you. And you're not. And then of course Stitch Jones saunters in with a towel round his waist, looking very good. Mario Van Peebles in this. He was in great shape in this. Singing a high-pitched falsetto song, and it is great cinema. This where their eyes lock, and Clint. He doesn't even well him. He gets an extra well. He gets a fourth well. Yeah. And where's your bunk?
Well. I'm here to tell you all that life as you know it has ended. You might as well all go to town tonight. You might as well laugh and make fools of yourself. Rub your pathetic little peckers up against your honey, or stick in a knot hole in the fence. But whatever it is, get rid of it, because at 0600 tomorrow, your ass is mine.
Picks Mario Van Peebles' character Jones up by the earring and then marches him with a towel around his waist across where the sleeping accommodation is, because he wants his money back for his Greyhound ticket.
And this is when we know, shows the professionalism of these people. That Jones is covered in jewellery.
Yeah.
You've got the guy with the sunglasses, and we're saying the sleeveless tops. This is the calibre that we're dealing with. And Clint's stands up straight, short haircut, and again you go into the haircuts a little bit later as well. But he's immediately setting himself as the alpha, and even then we're kind of promised someone called the Swede. Wait till the Swede comes back from the brig,
who was apparently was an NFL draft footballer who was cast specifically for his brawn. So he marches Jones across to his bunk, rips out his earring after not getting enough money back, and then says, "At 0600 tomorrow, your ass is mine." And the unit, the Jones goes into a wonderful little monologue about, "I'd have kicked his ass if you lot hadn't been here." And then Clint leaves and goes to the bar where he obviously stays when he's not being a Marine and he's off duty, and we get the first appearance of Aggie, his estranged wife at the Palace Inn.
Yeah, because of course, being Clint, he has to have an ex-wife somewhere
who's bitter and twisted.
I don't think that marriage was particularly happy, and we come across a couple of scenes later on where she goes into a bit more detail. And he's in there, and Stitch Jones is the evening's entertainment as well.
Which is amazing, given that he's just been given a warning that afternoon that at 0600 tomorrow morning he's going to be expected to be a Marine. He decides to go out that night in the Palace Inn and do a gig. And you've got quite a nice couple of shots here of Eastwood looking quite bemused about what's happened to this, obviously, bar that he used to frequent back when he was Jones's age. And his sort of mid-40s wife is now working there, ex-wife is working there as a cocktail waitress, and is obviously dating the guy that owns the bar.
Yeah. You must be sitting there thinking, this is one of these kids these days moments. There's a couple of other soldiers in there as well.
It's the guy that runs a bar. It's almost like he's run a bar for US Marines but hates US Marines, and they make that quite clear, because he comes straight over there. There's a bit of a scuffle, isn't there, where with a couple of off-duty Marines and Stitch, who's supposed to be performing. And then this Roy Jennings guy, who's playing Clint's ex-wife's love interest, runs over with what I can almost, it's like a truncheon, like a cosh, isn't it, and smashes up the desk. and throws Stitch and Eastwood out of the bar before Eastwood's even finished his first pint.
But of course, like you say, this is one of these people who's almost, you give me my money, but I hate you all. The reluctant bartender, or a bar owner.
And you think there's a bit of a story going to go on here, but it really doesn't.
Yeah.
All it is about Clint sort of reconciling his failed marriage, and that guy. You think I thought when we first saw him, we were going to get another protagonist.
Yeah.
So Powers was going to be the on-duty protagonist, and then Jennings was going to be every time Clint goes out and gets hammered, that this guy is going to be the off-duty. He's going to end up getting punched. But they kind of phase him out almost as soon as they phase him in.
Yeah, because he only has one very brief scene, I think shortly afterwards, when Aggie's leaving the bar.
He offers to drive her home.
Yeah. And I think that's the last time we see him.
Yeah, we don't. It doesn't really go any further. Clint gets to, I'll pin you over the table and nail you in the keister, I think is the phrase he uses.
Clint was very ahead of his time with a lot of this language.
Yeah, very much so. But it does really feel written that he gets. It's almost like the Alan Partridge book. Needless to say, I had the last laugh because every scene that Eastwood's in, he has to one up. He ends the scene. Every scene he comes out on top in every scene.
He is the victor, isn't he?
Yeah, in every single scene, and it's almost like he's on the front of his own U.S. Marine book with a tennis ball and
I didn't think about. Partridge have his, I suppose, it's been called Bouncing Back or something like that. Luckily, this one wasn't pulped at the end. And after this, we've got. He wakes the Marines up
an hour early.
Yeah.
He tells them you're right, at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Your ass is mine, and he goes in at 5 a.m., which is. In the army, what we call an absolute "see you next Tuesday's" trick, which is to pull them out. But you get some really good Mario Van Peebles here, walking into the what they call the head in a dressing gown, saying, "This is a frigging nightmare, man. Did you sleep well, Mr. Jones?" And,
I suppose this is the sort of thing you can only really pull once. But
It loses all its surprise factor after the first 5 a.m. start.
But again, this is the sort of the ragtag nature of them. They all turn up, and when they eventually present at the front for inspection.
Oh, they're all in civilian clothes and non-issue. They've all got marine issue PT shorts on.
That's
but
it.
They've got a mixture of t-shirts and trainers and earrings and necklaces and sunglasses,
haircuts,
and haircut. Yeah, the Marines are looking for a few good men, and you ain't it. So you get this Clint. He gets them to repeat "Surrender's not in our creed," and they don't do it with any real conviction. And then we get the first of what's one of the great recurring jokes in this film, which is the strip off those t-shirts.
Yeah, it's quite a nice thing, I suppose. This isn't him beasting them, because eventually they have to kind of get one over him, and we see it throughout where the idea is it's almost like a dress of the day, where he turns up, you have to wear what he wears, but he's never going to tell you.
No.
I mean, we had it where we were, where it's like, this is the dress of the day, where it's NATO jumpers, long sleeve shirts, jackets, whatever, and you have to wear that, whereas there's no message when you go for breakfast.
We had something called battery orders in the block, and they would come out daily at 4 p.m, so what we call the orderly NCO would post these orders, and they're like the daily orders, what they call prez. What we used to call prez. So you would read this, and if you read this between 4 and 5 p.m, you'd know where you needed to be at 8 a.m. the following day with the right kit. Yeah. And it basically follows you through your army career. That's never going to change. You're going to get that piece of information. It's probably changed how they deliver it now, but in my day, so there was a nail on the notice board in the accommodation block, and then 2 pieces of A4 with 1 staple would be pinned up with what you've got to be wearing and where you've got to be. And if you followed that, you weren't going to get into any trouble. Yeah. The great thing about this movie is that this recon platoon's just been left to fester, and it's alluded to by the brass that they're in bad shape, and so rather than like whip them into shape, they've just left them, and we get to it later, but Powers basically uses them as a training tool where he gets to hone his platoon's superior skills by just ragging them all around the place and just shooting them. And
I mean, just one point where, again, only a few minutes away, they are basically the cannon fodder in their exercise, where his platoon have to ambush them, and they're basically playing laser tag. Yeah. And of course, Clint being Clint will not have this. No. My team don't.
And Shuzu says to him, it certainly helps when you know where you're going to be ambushed, that kind of thing. So Clint being Clint decides not to ambush them where they're expecting to be ambushed.
And you've got the sort of minor triumph there where they all jump out and the smoke's going, and even Powers has lost his his laser tag thing is lit up.
So he takes them for a run, and they're all bare-chested. Clint's got his T-shirt on, and on the first run he tries to. They just decide that they're going to smoke him, which means like tearing past him at full sprint on the training area, and they all sort of collapse by this armoured vehicle, like knackered, and then he just jogs past them and keeps going.
It's important to keep in your pace.
And then when he gets them back to camp, they're kind of marching them around bare-chested, and Clint says, "Cojones, give us a cadence," because the other troop, Webster. We see the first appearance of Webster, who's his like other gunnery sergeant running first platoon. He's
like his Smithers.
Yeah, he's like a proper lick-spittle, arse-kissing, quite brave to cast a black guy.
And bear in mind, he's pretty much the only, other than Mario Van Peebles, the only black guy in there.
And so he cast him as a villain, and which in the 1980s, I thought it was quite a bit of brave casting, because he really is an awful kiss ass.
Yeah.
And then you get a lovely bit of Clint where somebody gives him the bird behind his back, and because he's omnipotent and he can sense that someone's stuck the finger, he's going to see. He says, "Your girlfriend's going to weep when I snap that clean off."
Model A Ford and a tank full of gas.
Model A Ford and a tank full of gas.
Handful of pussy and a mouthful of ass.
Handful of pussy and a mouthful of ass.
Probably, this isn't 2020 or anything like that, where they're all running, they've all sprinted ahead. They're all looking very sunburnt. I wonder what the sun care provision was in.
Probably nothing. Well, it was anything like my time in the army. It was fucking zero.
Yeah.
There was like, basically, if you got sunburn, it was because you didn't have enough uniform on and no hat. There were no and sunglasses were viewed as weakness. like burn you. They'd rather your retina's burnt out than give you any kind of eye protection from the sun.
That will cost money, though.
Yeah. Things do cost money.
It's the next day, isn't it? They turn up. He's on scene, ready to beast them for another day, and they are proper refuseniks at this point because someone, the Swede, has got out of the brig.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got just before that happens, we get the first appearance of Lieutenant Ring, who is the officer commanding recon platoon, and Eastwood walks into his office and asks if he can freelance. So, which is army speak for I'm going to take these men and whip them into shape under my own terms, and that's important because the way he does it is breaks every military code and every rule that will.
The sort of thing that they did in his day.
Yeah. So Ring asks, he tells him that he was at the top of his class in sort of officer cadet corps, and Eastwood comes out with, "I'll sleep better at night knowing that." So, what school did you go to? And he delivers the line, Heartbreak Ridge. And he says, "I'd never heard of that school."
Which college is that?
So they come out the following day for their first day of training, and they've all got the same green T-shirt on, and he tells them to strip them off again. Because he's not got the same T-shirt as him, which is this lovely recurring joke that we're going to get every time they come out for a run. And then we get the first use of improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yeah, because his T-shirt, was that the red one?
So he's in a red T. They all come out in green. He's in red. And this is going to recur throughout the film that. There's a lovely scene, a couple of training exercises in the future where they all run out with a handful of T-shirts, trying to anticipate which one he might have on.
And then it's only a little bit later on when Jones ends up meeting the proprietor of where he's staying, and basically he knows what he's wearing the next day. And
and there's a lovely smug panning shot of the whole platoon sort of wearing the same T-shirt, and then Lieutenant Ring runs up in his white PT shirt and ruins it.
I suppose it's hard to describe Ring. I mean, I suppose he's well intentioned, but he's very much like a direct, not in a day's service.
He looks like one of the guys from Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah.
He's perfectly cast as like a nerdy officer.
Like Sweet Chuck from Police Academy. Or
absolutely. So we're although Eastwood's apparently freelancing recon. Everywhere he does a bit of training, first platoon aren't far away, like doing their own version of it, but better. So Clint takes them for a run, and we get the first hint of the story that Aponte, is going AWOL at this stage and missing a lot of this training, and that Highway they're abseiling down a building, but you might have been able to get away with this with our previous sergeant, but Highway's going to find you out, man, and that kind of thing. And he hits them with the AK-47 for the first time when they're on PT. So he lets them run ahead, jumps out behind them, and fires live rounds at them.
This is the AK-47 assault rifle, the preferred weapon of your enemy. And it makes a distinctive sound when fired at you, so remember it.
Probably frowned upon even in 1983 when this is set.
Well, yeah, I think there is. You do live fire. You do have live rounds fired at you.
Yeah.
Sort of 25 feet above your head, so that you can hear the bullets crack over.
Yeah.
But Eastwood is firing an AK-47 at them from the hip at a range of about 40 yards and spraying bullets all around them. Which
there's the total sort of dancing around.
And you can see why the US Department of Defence probably had a problem with this in the script, because I don't know anybody that would have been allowed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, bear in mind, this isn't hardly a historical piece. This came out 3 years after it was set.
Yeah.
This isn't... Oh, in the old days, this was this was.
Well, the Marines wanted to showcase all the equipment that was used in the back, because Kevlar and Kevlar body armour and helmets. That was the first US deployment in Grenada where the modern equipment was used. So the equipment in this film is spot on.
Yeah, because we have the scene where Stitch turns up with basically an old tin hat.
Yeah, they're on the range and he's got. Did you wake up this morning with a piss pot on your head? And he gives him the story about. No, this is a tribute to the Korean War veterans such as yourself.
But then again, like you said, it hints upon the issues where he has to he says he has to pawn his helmet, his Kevlar for money.
Yeah.
Because for various other reasons, like we said, they've got second jobs, they've got other forms of income and expense that probably isn't official. I mean, they seem to spend a lot of money on booze and boom boxes really, and sunglasses. So the fact that he turns up in this, and the fact that he makes a point of saying, where's your Kevlar?
Yeah, it didn't find its way into one of the pawn shops downtown, did it? Well, that's a serious accusation, Gunny.
Yeah.
We're financially responsible for these bad boys.
I suppose it's a bit far ahead to say it turns up on eBay, but there's probably someone there.
For the 1983 equivalent of eBay would have been would have been a pawn shop in a downtown sort of US garrison town.
Oh, so we didn't mention the Swede, did we?
I don't think he's turned up. I'm not sure.
He was there before the laser tag.
Profile's got to have his ND on the right. He has a negligent discharge.
Yeah.
So Profile, which is a derogatory nickname for anybody with a medical profile. So if you're called Profile, it's because in the British Army you would have been called a Fablon Biff chit. Right. So when you're sick in the British Army, you'd have like a chit that says what you're not allowed to do. So it might say no running or no boots for a week because you've got shin splints or something like that. And if you had this chit covered in sort of sticky back sticky back plastic, it was deemed to be long term that you could carry it around. So it's almost like a get out of jail card. So when somebody came up to you and say, "Why aren't you wearing this itchy shirt or something like that?" So Profile has the ND on the range, and he spends the trip back running round the platoon.
That's quite funny.
Because he nearly kills Major Powers with a negligent discharge.
It's another almost like a Full Metal Jacket thing with Private Pile, isn't it?
If you'd have pulled that on any kind of range in the military, you would be going to jail. That's like a court to fire off. A negligent discharge is like an arrestable offence. You wouldn't have just been punished with a bit of extra PT.
Even in 1983, probably.
Yeah, and don't give the prick the satisfaction to your commanding officer. Also, is it probably a frowned upon disciplinary method for...
Although you think that Killifer / Powers.
Yeah.
Major Powers.
Yeah, so it's when Profile gets back that we meet... This is like the fourth training... So he walks into the barracks at 6 a.m. after Profile's at his ND, and none of the guys will go outside. Yeah. And they've basically set up their own little theatre of telling Highway no. And Clint's quite good at looking quite perplexed in this as to why.
What is this?
What's this all about? Why aren't you running it? He says something like, "Get outside there on that road, there, ladies, or I'll boot your ass into outer space or something." And then we meet the Swede, and they start singing "Hit the Road, Jack." And he's basically like Ram Man from Masters of the Universe, isn't he? He comes out in those marine
muscle,
just like absolute 6 foot beefcake Scandinavian sort of pro football player. Yeah. Who introduces himself with "I'm going to tear off your head and shit down your neck," which would scare any man on the planet, but not Clint.
Not Clint.
Sweet, say something charming to the man.
I'm going to rip your head off and shit down your neck.
So you see, Grungy Highway, we ain't got no use for you no more.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back.
No more, no more, no more, no more, no more.
chin up. Higher.
Even mid-50s Clint,
No.
I mean, and I'm having seen, and this again something where we might be missing a bit of tension, having seen him do something very similar to a slightly overweight version of this in the drunk tank.
Yeah.
When he's drunk and in the middle of a story, Clint on duty, he doesn't take
But
long.
once he's bested him as well, he gets him in like an arm lock on the floor, and even makes him stick his chin up, so Clint gets to do his, needless to say, I had the last laugh.
I got the last punch.
Yeah, by knocking him clean out. And then we see a little bit of Highway's compassion, where the guy knows he's in trouble and says, I'll wait outside for the military police. Yeah. And he says, negative, I'm going to turn you into a Marine, like he wasn't one already. That's that dealt with.
There is a little bit, almost of that. I mean, we don't get a lot of development between the characters other than Clint and Stitch mainly, but there is the part where the exercise where they're jumping out of the plane.
Yeah, so they write a weakness in for the Swede, don't they? Which is because we've got to show a bit of. There's a couple of bits of compassion. There's the bit with the Ponte's children, where we find out later. There's a little bit coming up later where Ponte goes AWOL, and there's the bit with the Swede, which is on the next exercise, where they're jumping out of a Chinook helicopter, going out the rear on parachutes. The reasons aren't quite explained on an exercise. It seems an awful lot of money to hemorrhage on an exercise.
Yeah, just for the first past the post job, isn't it?
Yeah.
But this, like most of these, and I guess this 86 would have been perfect timing for, or B.A. Baracus can't get in a plane. So they've got to have the Swede. I'm afraid of heights.
And then Highway, of course, admits that he is too. Yeah. And they jump out, and you do get they've obviously spent a bit of money on showing a sort of helicopter parachute drop onto a training area, although completely unnecessary. Yeah. And then the recon units shake out, and we always know they're recon because they never wear their helmets. They always wear their sort of soft bush caps. And Jones explains to Highway that it doesn't really matter how much noise they make with their slung weapons because Major Powers wants them to die in a loud, grotesque and military manner, to which you know that Clint is, who is also carrying his AK-47 at this point, which is a bit odd. And
that's very much the weapon of the enemy. It reminds them.
Because it makes a very distinctive sound when fired at you.
But it's almost like they're putting that in to use later on for when they are fighting enemies with AK-47s.
But it doesn't come up apart from I suppose you could say when they're walking through the village and Lieutenant Ring, good morning man, I'm joining you for this exercise today, and he fires it at them and good lord, what was that? And we get that sound again.
I think was it the first contact with the soldiers in Grenada?
Yes.
They have AK-47s because they go, oh, it's an AK-47.
And the exposition is it really just smashes you in the face with you have to have this explained to you because this is Clint's film and he's about to go off and do something really brave and not at all stupid.
Well, that's the sort of thing you win medals for. So after this we've had he's in the bar and the unit have been commissioned, so this is their first sort of exercise that they've been, like we talked about earlier, they've all kitted up where they're looking everywhere, where's my this, where's my that, because they're soldiers but they're unprofessional.
Yeah, so Clint and Chuzu are having a beer in the bar, and Mary, who runs the Marine sort of accommodation bar, is told that your battalion's just gone on full alert. So they hightail it back to camp, and then you get this lovely scene of recon in the squad bay. Where's my web gear? Where's my rifle? And then Eastwood walks in, and this is the first time where we see a little bit of compassion for the recon. So, which is, let's do a kit check. You've got your rifle, you've got your boots on. Fuck it, that will do. That's enough to go into battle. And we think they're going off to war. Yeah. And then we get a scene with Webster and Powers, and a senior sort of colonel of the Marines, and they're filling in forms. And Clint Eastwood's trying to get recon some night vision goggles, and he's told that he can't have them.
Fill out the proper
forms, and we just get to see. And it's just again about fleshing out Powers' character, and we're just learning what an absolute dick he is.
Yeah. But then this is almost what kind of illustrates him, and we find out later that's actually where his background is supply. So, he's all about doing everything by the book. Yeah. Clint is, in almost every film, is very much the opposite of that.
Yeah. So, and we have to have this little scene where they have a little sort of face-to-face and a little argument. And then a big brass comes up and asks him what he's... well, first of all, he thinks he recognises him and asks if they served together. Yeah. And it turns out that they were in the Battle of Khe Sanh in 1968, and they were in sort of sister companies, and we chewed a bit of the same dirt, sir. and then he asks him what he thinks of this alert, and Clint immediately tells him it's a clusterfuck. And one of the things that we loved about this film in the block was to be that, I recognise that getting geared up to go somewhere, being put on high alert, and then nothing happening, and just waiting, and then being told that you're stood down, is all too common for 80s and 90s soldiering, that where nothing really happened unless you were deployed.
What's your assessment of this alert? It's a clusterfuck. Say again? Marines are fighting men, sir. They shouldn't be sitting around on their sorry asses filling out request forms for equipment they should already have.
Oh, well, you'd always find out. Everybody sort of fitted their role in those kind of things, and I like that scene where. But again, it's another Partridge scene for Clint, because he has to cut. He has to have the killer line, and he has to have the put down. Interesting observation, Gunny, is what the Colonel seems to think of it.
Yeah, and I mean, from a purely 80s point of view, it was nice that the Colonel was the police captain or lieutenant from Street Hawk. So
I never knew that.
I will always take any Street Hawk reference. There were only 13 episodes. They were all wonderful. Yeah, no, he was there, and this was again him, because he's old school, because he served. You know, he's not a sort of career paperclip counter like Powers. He immediately has that rapport with Clint, and it goes on throughout to the further down the line when we have the reception.
Yes.
He turns up, and because he sees the ribbons.
This is very much the middle act of the film, and what we're doing now is establishing, because we cut from that alert where they get stood down, and we round off the Aponte is going AWOL story.
Yeah.
So you get Highway with his buzz cut marine haircut in civilian clothes, goes into a gymnasium to basically threaten Stitch with where is he? I'm gonna and you get a lovely little standoff between Mario Van Peebles and Eastwood, which is, on this occasion, I'm going to refrain from kicking your ass. And he takes him to Aponte's house, and Aponte is the decent Hispanic Marine who has taken a second job because the Corps doesn't pay enough for him and his babies.
He's got what, four or five
kids, and you've got this wonderful scene of Clint Eastwood reeling off $100 bills to support him so he can get back in the game, and while holding a baby under his arm. And
as soon as he walks in, it's like, I don't care who this man is, hold this baby.
Yeah, and it's a really lovely little scene. So you can see that he's warming to his charges now.
Yeah. That was like the scene you had when you came here tonight to record.
Yeah, with the children. Yeah, we did. And at the same time that he's warming to his charges, we are getting more of Aggie. So Marsha Mason, who I love from The Goodbye Girl, so she's one of my favourites.
And also the mum of Phoebe Cates in Drop Dead Fred.
Of course she is. Yeah, so she calls him a crazy old Marine warhorse, and she tries to let him back in her life, but then she realises he's outflanked her, and he's started rubbing her. He's been reading his women's magazines,
That's the payoff.
Yeah. We get a little bit.
She goes nuclear.
Yeah, she realises he's trying to outflank her with a new tactic, and she throws him out. Yeah. And this is going to lead to him going and getting blind drunk and nearly getting himself into a lot of trouble. Yeah. But we cut to a bar where Stitch, as the Ayatollah of rock and roller and the Duke of Cool, has been cheated out of a talent contest by Miss Banana Titties.
80s gold.
Absolutely. Yeah. The only thing that's missing from this is Patrick Swayze being the doorman of this bar.
That may as well have been Roadhouse.
It could have been cut to Roadhouse now, and Stitch Jones is performing.
We need some more of these crossovers where you've got one of the cars of Roadhouse in the background and going, again.
Who's the old bouncer in Roadhouse? The cowboy from who I love, Sam Elliott. Is it Sam Elliott?
Yes, yeah.
So yeah, this scene could only be bettered if we could have cut Sam Elliott and Patrick Swayze from Roadhouse into this bar.
We just need to see someone getting thrown out the window at the front.
Yeah. So the long and short of it is that Highway and Jones, the two headlocking Marine end up in the same cell. Yeah. And are bailed out by Aggie's money and Sergeant Major Chuzu, who they take him back to his accommodation at Mary's bar. And they pour him some coffee, where he immediately sobers up. Yeah, because he's absolutely shit-faced when they find him, but he gets into a really deep and meaningful I want to get back with you conversation with his ex-wife within 20 minutes. Yeah,
because while he sat on a pool table, just sort of looking very lucid all of a sudden.
Yeah, so Sergeant Major Chuzu's taking Jones around the bar and showing him all the Korean War photos. Yeah. And then we get the Medal of Honor sort of citation and explanation while Clint's upstairs.
Listen, while Stitch, you can see it dawns on him. Then
this is the T-shirt payoff gag. Yeah. This is so. he asks Mary if she sees Highway up and about in the morning. She says, yeah, I pour his coffee and lay his things out. And then you get that lovely... Again, it could only be better if they'd done that like flash off his teeth when the moment drops that... So the long and short of it is that Jones sees Highway's T-shirt for the following morning, and when Highway turns up, the whole platoon, having had their hair cut, are all wearing the same T-shirt. Although Frighetti has cut the sleeves off, or either rolled the sleeves up, or he still looks like the Fonz.
He's just missing the fag packet in the sleeve.
Yeah. And then they go on another exercise with First Platoon, which is the first of the pit.
Yeah.
And
that's the parachute one, isn't it?
Yeah. This is where we get the Swede, and they parachute in, and of course there's a big run. The two platoons, First Platoon and Recon, they run for the pit, and you can't really tell who's won. Although, if you look at it, Jones is the first into the water, so technically Recon won. And then you get
no VAR in
no.
Great Ridge,
But then we get like our Top Gun homoerotic 30 Marines with their shirts off scene, wrestling in mud and water. Just needed a Kenny Loggins soundtrack, maybe a bit of Patrick Swayze.
I'm surprised he didn't do the soundtrack for this one.
No. So the matchup, and a bit I spotted in this that I hadn't spotted, and I've seen this film a million times. So earlier on, where Stitch is in the bar having an argument with the Marines, where Roy Jennings comes up and smashes up the table with a kosh, the two Marines that he grabs by the testicles, where he thinks he's won the matchup, are the same two that were sat at the table in that bar. So we were establishing that they were dickhead First Platoon Marines. And then, of course, Sergeant Major Chuzu says, well, there's only one way to settle this: platoon sergeants front and centre. And then Ed Kilifer, fresh from dunking Felix in a shark tank, says, I'm leading your platoon today, Sergeant. And the problem with this scene, for me, is that there's no tension in it. Because two men are walking into a bare-chested into a bear pit. I think they keep their T-shirts on, don't they?
They do, yeah.
So they walk in T-shirted into a bed. And so if you're going to set up a scene and the music starts to build and swell, the sort of rat-a-tat drum marine music with the swell of the orchestral soundtrack starts to build, but if you go into a bear pit with Clint Eastwood, only Clint Eastwood's walking out the bear pit.
Having seen Clint Eastwood in every
single film, from Where Eagles Dare, every Sergio Leone western,
and he hasn't made in this film too.
Yes, and we're going to get another, needless to say, I had the last laugh moment
as he stands there victorious. I mean, Kilifer did get in a couple of digs. You know, this wasn't a completely one, but it's like a Rocky fight.
But I'd love to have been like the assistant director saying, and what we're going to do is we're going to have you hurled out of here by your belt. So you're like, not only has he broken you, but he's going to humiliatingly drag you out of this bear pit.
You are an old dog. Go back to counting.
And of course, the upshot to this is that the Recon platoon are now coming around to Highway's way of thinking, and man, it felt great beating Major Power's elite fighting unit today. At which point, Gunnery Sergeant Webster turns up at Recon platoon and wants statements for all of them that Highway used live firing, fired live rounds on an exercise.
This is placed so much as the vindictive. I was beaten in the fight. You know, this is it cuts from the bear pit to this straight away. And
it's Major Powers basically, because he's already told him that, you know, you're going to drum yourself out of this unit, and he nearly does with the drunk thing that Chuzu and Jones rescued him from the drunk tank. And you get the wonderful Mario Van Peebles impression of Eastwood, like doing the "Don't go away, Mag, just go away." And they drum Webster out with a little guitar riff, and then write the Bionic Marine.
Swede stands right behind him.
Just basically. So basically, they're coming around to Highway's way of thinking, and Jones really builds Highway up. He tells the platoon that Highway won the Congressional Medal of Honor at Heartbreak Ridge.
And this is why, while Ring's in the shower moaning about how many times he's been bitten by mosquitoes.
Oh, that's profile. Yeah. And this is the point where we know that when they get into war, you pretty much know which member of this platoon is going to get killed on this invasion. So we cut from the platoon celebrating their win against Powers to a sort of full dress uniform party,
full regalia.
Yeah. So we get to see Eastwood and Sergeant Major Chuzu in their full dress marine blues, which and they're at the party, and of course there's an announcement at the party that they're going to war.
While he's dancing very much with his ex-wife,
and that you feel that their marriage is going to reconcile. She puts some conditions on him that, you know, I don't want to, you know, you're going to get out of this soon, you're nearly finished. And then we go into the third act. We're going to go to the invasion of Grenada.
After Grenada,
which again, actually happened in October 1983, but Grenada was a British Commonwealth island, and Thatcher had phoned Reagan, and basically she supported it publicly because of the Cubans, but privately she sent a message to him saying, please don't send American troops into a British Commonwealth. It really kicked up a bit of a stink at the time, but this is what the film's been leading up to, which is taking recon to war, and we're on the deck of an aircraft carrier. So it goes very Top Gun at this point. The Marines are ready. Yeah,
because again, even Jones puts in the sort of token. I wasn't really. This wasn't what I signed up for.
Yeah, like actually marining and doing some marini stuff.
But I mean, some of the work here, they're being dropped off the coast and having to make their way in.
The coast drop-off's very strong, although brilliantly filmed, and like nobody more than me at 14 liked seeing or 15 like seeing guys jumping out of Huey helicopters 30 feet above the water, going to shore wearing frogman's fins, but they drop them 30 feet from the beach, which is like, well, just fucking land on the beach, just land the helicopter. But it's a movie, so so we get we're now with recon and highway on the invasion of Grenada, which is very much the third act of the film, and some of the stories were written into this invasion. Because they happened. Right, yeah. So the stealing the bulldozer happened.
See, it's funny because watching that in a film, it's one of those. How convenient!
How convenient! It looks ridiculous. Actually happened. U.S. Army Rangers hot-wired a bulldozer and drove it at a bridge to a load of Cuban regulars with Russian rifles.
And that's exactly what happened. Was it Casino Royale? He did that. And Living Daylights as well.
Living Daylights. There's a couple of JCB and bulldozer moments.
They get everywhere, these things. And this is after, they start coming under fire, and this is the AK-47.
Yeah, we get the clack, 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 clack of the AK-47, and they all recognise it and take cover.
And then they sort of return fire, and Clint's like, he's had enough of this. He's like,
he drops his.
You know who I am?
Cover my ass. Yeah. I think that, funny enough, this is. I wrote this down. Clint does a really strange thing with his M16. That he puts his M16 on full auto. He reaches over and changes it with his left hand.
Okay.
Well, you could have just done it with his thumb because he's right-handed.
We're both pretending to do it.
Yeah. So he does like he reaches over there. If you had an SA-80, that's what you'd do. You'd reach over with your left arm and do your change lever at the back. But you had an M16 and the change lever's right by where the forward stop is on a. So it was almost like done for the movie to make make like cocking a rifle look more spectacular than it
Seems
was.
Like it's like his thing.
Yeah.
It's my weird.
So of course, facing a load of Russian rifles and Cuban regular soldiers with Russian uniforms, Clint runs off on his own and nearly gets himself. He runs across the road and takes out 2 machine gun nests on his own.
Well, because that's just normal business for him.
And then they steal a bulldozer and take out a load of Cubans near a bridge in Grenada. And then they all walk across the bridge. Yeah. Rather than like a massive choke point where they could all be killed, but they just all go across the bridge. Apart from Jones, who gets his Hollywood moment where he wades through the water. And what they're showing you there is these guys are becoming Marines now. They're sort of revelling in their.
It's all coming back to them.
Yeah.
But say once they've done this bit, they reconvene, and their orders are to go to the university.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, looks like a former polytechnic. It's kind of made of wood, and I think it's a medical school of some sort.
So they sort of walk in, don't they? And Jones. Well, another interesting fact. So Jones gets to disturb a very voluptuous, naked, big-breasted woman in the shower who was rumoured to be Eastwood's squeeze through the filming of this film.
I'll get you into Hollywood, love.
Yeah. So and you could see that because Eastwood obviously directed this as well. Yeah. So you could see that he'd had fun getting his girlfriend naked on the set. And then we kill Profile.
Yeah.
So Lieutenant Ring makes the tragic error of they release they get the students released from the university and they're told to recon a hill.
Did you see the funny bit though when they free the hostages?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's an American thing or something like that. There's our cat, we're free, and all the soldiers are getting hugged, and that's almost like part of you would think that's the end of the film. They've reached their objective. Yeah. They freed the hostages here, have some hugs, and all of a sudden it's like, no, new orders.
Yeah. Now you're going to go off and do something dangerous. Yeah. So somebody's spotted armour on the hill, and Lieutenant Ring takes the platoon up the hill to recon the armour, but they get cut off by the 2 armoured vehicles and a load of Cuban regular soldiers with Russian rifles. And Ring runs the platoon into... well, it's the last thing you want to do with armoured vehicles. He gets them all into a building...
Into one place.
Where they are a sitting duck. And this action gets Profile killed. This is my favourite bit of the film. Because this is where... the wonderful parts of my life mesh. This is the telecommunications expert and the soldier. So they're trying to call in an airstrike, and their radio. Profile was wearing the radio when he was killed by the. And now they've got to try and find a cut telephone line. So they send Jones up on the roof to try and find it. And he does.
Yes.
He does. He goes up on the roof with a bayonet and he finds... Now, I've got all sorts of equipment on my van for toning out cut telephone wires that will put beeps down them to tell me that 12 metres away there's a cut. But Jones, under fire, runs up on a roof with a bayonet, finds the cut telephone line, puts it back together under fire, and then Lieutenant Ring picks up the handset and it works.
I wonder if he's available. Do you need an assistant?
I could do with somebody that can find cut telephone lines.
This podcast is sponsored by Ascent Aerials. And I mean, things like that where, you know, we talked about having that military background where you watch this. As someone whose current or now profession is dealing with...
cut telephone lines.
Watching that, does that make you feel like either... maybe this is how simple things were in 1983.
Well, I mean, joining a cut telephone line is brilliant, but being able to find where it's cut just by guessing that it's cut, it must be cut on the roof, so it's there. And he goes up and he finds the first match of telephone lines. He gets one pair, ties them together,
and they make a long distance connect call with a credit card he happens to have because he always has his plastic.
And he gets to do the very 80s shot of opening a wallet. And I always wanted a wallet with a concertina plastic container that drops like 80 credit cards out.
I think my phone does that now with all the loyalty cards, but doing it for real.
So they do a credit... But I looked this up. Apparently, the credit card collect call to Camp Lejeune, it wasn't the US Marines, it was the US 82nd Airborne, did something similar. They did a collect call to their barracks to call in their own airstrike by telephone.
So I suppose that's the initiative. You've got to, improvise and adapt.
And then we get this Gummy Highway. Eastwood's character runs out to put down some covering fire, and we think that he might be killed. Only we don't think that because he's Clint Eastwood. Yeah. And of course he comes to... He gets blown up by effectively an armoured vehicle, but effectively a tank for everybody else. And of course, because he's Clint Eastwood, he just opens his eyes without a scratch. And then we get like our 15th we're not going to be swapping spit in the showers joke, which is a bit problematic these days. But
it's almost like... Again, this is an 80s movie where, times have changed, but this seems to be Clint hammering home the point. It's like,
that he's not...
I am a man.
Yeah, I am a man. I'm a heterosexual man. And
that was my girlfriend in the shower.
So the tit shot, that's all down to me.
They take the hill, they take the tower, and this is when the same colonel just happens to rock up in his helicopter as Powers is on scene giving Clint a bollocking.
For taking the hill.
For almost like doing heroic army, marine soldier things. I told you not to do that, you were supposed to sit back and read out of a manual. The colonel turns up and immediately sends, where were you before you served here? Supplies. Fuck off back there.
Yeah, were you good at that, Major? Yeah. Well then stick to it, because you're a walking clusterfuck as an infantry officer. Of course, you get the lovely sort of Sergio Leone Western moment of Clint sat on his rock with his big cigar, saying, with all due respect, sir, you're beginning to bore the hell out of me.
As he's full of face paint.
Yeah, and he looks great. He looks proper Clint in that scene. And then he says to Tuesday that we're not 0-1-1 now. Yeah. And the 0-1-1 joke was, lost one, drawn one. Lost one, drawn one. Fought 3, won none. Lost one, drawn one.
But this is it. I mean, this is, Clint has won the day. His nemesis Powers has been sent off back to the dean of the university, or the principal of the high school has been sent packing. It's the sort of Ferris Bueller moment, I suppose.
The thing that we loved in the plot, obviously the film ends with the brass band Homecoming coming back from the invasion, and what everybody in my unit loved about this is, I did 4 operational tours and I came back, and whenever I flew back to RF Lynham or Bryce Norton, it was always some shitty Hercules transport plane at 3 in the morning. Nobody met you.
Yeah.
You were just, from the second you landed, you were transported back to your barracks, and there was no welcome, no flags, no fuck all. All you had was clean your rifles, clean your boots, and if you're lucky, we'll get you on leave at some point tomorrow. It's a massive, massive anticlimax.
It's like coming back from a World Cup.
Yeah. But we learned that Clint's going to be forced into mandatory retirement, and that Jones decides not to be a rock and roll star.
He comes back to, I lost count of how many women were there waiting for him.
Yeah, and that we don't see him again until he's a senior police officer in New Jack City.
Yeah.
Or Jaws the Revenge, which he maybe left the Marines to do a job as the Jamaican tour guide.
Yeah, I suppose he was that good at being a Marine.
I was surprised that Merriweather Peoples didn't have I think he's quite a popular producer and financer of movies.
Okay.
And writer. Because I think he was behind New Jack City. It was his idea.
Yeah.
But I thought, because it was almost Heartbreak Ridge introduced him.
Yeah.
And he looked like, because he's got that charisma, that Michael Keaton type sort of wacky charisma that you thought he'd go on to have a stellar career, and he didn't. Yeah,
you do wonder. I mean, obviously it's easy to say now, looking back and thinking, well, why did people's careers not work out for various reasons? It's easy to see if you're a woman. But if you're looking at someone like that, you wonder what's going on behind the scenes. We talked about this film, for example, where Clint Eastwood got basically the producer.
He fell out with his long-time Malpaso producer, because apparently when they were recceing, his producer, because Clint's done 4 Korean War movies, and he's done sort of Letters from Iwo Jima, and I think Walt Kowalski from Gran Torino is Thomas Highway in all but name. He's almost like a sequel to Heartbreak Ridge. What Tom Highway would have been like if he'd been retired and he'd outlived his wife and become a widower and bitter and twisted. And the fact of the matter is, during Clint Eastwood's military service, he didn't deploy to Korea. His colleagues did. He was a lifeguard. Yeah, he was a US Army lifeguard, and he spent the Korean War. He spent 1951 as a lifeguard. Now, when they were doing this with the Marines were absolutely ripping the piss out of him for this on the location shoots. And they weren't, because his long-time collaborator was a serving US Marine who deployed to Korea. And Eastwood had his stuff put in a dumpster at Malpaso in California. And then there are all these stories around Eastwood, aren't they, of when you've wronged him, he basically cuts you out for good.
You kind of think, from all the roles he's played, he's this kind of, renegade, but he does his own thing. But you kind of think, once you get past that, the ego that must be there.
I love him to bit. I mean, I first saw him in Where Eagles Dare. My parents let me watch Where Eagles Dare on sort of terrestrial TV in Easter 90. Well, it was Whitsun, because it was my birthday, and I got to stay up and watch Where Eagles Dare at like 9 years old in 1981, and it blew me away. And Eastwood was just so cool in 1960, and he's with Richard Burton. So anything with Eastwood in that kind of role, I love. But when Eastwood then sort of sets up Malpaso, and anything after Play Misty for me, where he kind of writes his own scenes and directs his own scenes, there's a huge ego attached to everything he does.
And as we said,
even now, in The Mule,
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's still Eastwood. It's still Highway. He's still Harry Callahan. But I can't. I don't think I'd like it. I don't think I'd like his politics. I don't think I'd like him in real life.
No.
But he's one of those heroes that you're like, I can't help but like you as a movie star. You're a great movie star.
It's one of these where, and I know there were some stories maybe a couple of years ago, and it turned out about how he was when he was he married to Sandra Locke?
So, well, he wasn't. He never married Sandra Locke, but she wrote a book about him, and it's scathing. I mean, horrible, it's almost as abusive. It's very similar to what Peter Sellers' children described their relationship with him like. Yeah. And Sandra Locke was absolutely scathing about Eastwood, and he tried to. I mean, he had her on non-disclosure agreements, and he was apparently quite handy with his. It's an odd one, because you can't reconcile it, but you kind of know he's like that. Because he writes it into all his films, and
it's almost like, I mean, and again, not forgiving anything, it was almost like he probably looks at that as, well, that was normal at the time.
Yeah.
And again, there's stories about, and I think a few years ago we talked about another episode where I think an old interview with John Wayne in Playboy came out again quite recently.
Yeah.
Someone shared it on Twitter, and it was talking to John Wayne in the 60s, and let's say he was not a progressive person either.
No, and you say that interview was of its time. It doesn't make that right back then, but context is a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, I suppose it's going to come up because it's the first time we really talked about Clint Eastwood, where it's the issue about separating the man and the movies or the man and the art. Where you think about, I didn't watch a lot of Clint Eastwood when I was growing up. I mean, I think my only real experiences were like Firefox and Any Which Way But Loose and that, because my dad loved Clint Eastwood.
I love Firefox. Yeah. Firefox is a massive guilty pleasure for me.
I think that when I looked at iTunes earlier for something, that was because that was the last film I bought on iTunes because it was $2.99 the other week. And I think at one point when I was I think I had my first DVD player and I suddenly started getting into watching Dirty Harry DVDs and I'm getting all these Dirty Harry films and I loved them and I still do.
I do. Yeah. I'd with Dirty Harry, I think because it was terrestrial TV as well, I'd watched a redacted version of it until I was about 15 years old when I finally got to see, because Dirty Harry's quite dark.
Yeah.
It's really quite.
It's not just a sort of cop and a suspect, is it?
No, there's a real pernicious vindictiveness to Harry Callahan in Dirty Harry. They kind of phase it out. By the time it gets to the Deadpool in 1988, Harry's like.
He's a cartoon version.
Of Callahan. But
that first one was vicious.
Yeah. As was Magnum Force as well, which David Soul, so always worth a watch.
Classic, no.
But yeah, it's Heartbreak Ridge, massive fat. If it's on terrestrial TV, I own it. Yeah. But if it's on terrestrial TV, I'll watch it. But they never put it on before sort of 11:50. It's like one of those 11:50 BBC One films.
After Match of the Day jobs.
Yeah, it's not like a nice sort of warm 7 p.m. Easter Monday where Eagles Dare or a TCM type touch. Yeah. You don't get to see Heartbreak Ridge a lot because I think it is probably quite problematic. Yeah. But there's no real they never really flesh out. Marsha Mason has some good bits as Aggie, but it really is should we put some women in? Yeah, we'll have one in. We'll have a naked one in the shower.
Yeah.
It wouldn't pass the Bechdel test.
No. I mean, bear in mind, I don't think even Aggie talks to another woman about anything.
Anything other than Clint.
Yeah.
Anybody that if Clint's not in a scene in Heartbreak Ridge, he's being talked about.
Yeah. And this is again like a Partridge thing almost. Yeah. God, I never thought I'd be comparing Alan Partridge to
Clint Eastwood. But there we are. We've arrived at that.
In his book.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was Heartbreak Ridge. Thank you for bringing your copy. I know it's considerably worn out, being one of your favourites and having been through various training blocks with you and all that. Now, Simon, tell us a little bit about where we can find you on Twitter.
At Simon from Harlow, as one word. I'm Simon and I'm from Harlow.
And we get, I mean, I'll be honest, and this is one of the reasons I enjoy your Twitter feed mostly, it's mostly pictures of dogs.
It's mainly me at work showing pictures of dogs. There's occasional swearing at West Ham United. There's a little bit of pithy put-downs of life, curmudgeonly middle-aged life. But there's no politics and there's no nonsense, and we're just there to have a bit of fun.
That's the main reason for it. And we also learn a little bit about some of the services you provide as a Yoda of AV, of satellite and various aerial installations, and about maybe some of the finer aspects of customer service.
Yes, and getting paid for the jobs that you do.
Yeah, because the customer is always right unless they're yours.
Unless they're mine, in which case, I don't hate my customers. I would like to go on record and say I don't hate all of my customers.
And thank you for coming down and doing with Recce some things that I asked for as well.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. It's always good to talk about Heartbreak Ridge with somebody that loves it as much as I do.
And as is tradition, the song that was number one when this film came out in the UK, which was the 9th of January 1987, it was Reet Petite by Jackie Wilson, not Jockey Wilson, as I think they played on Top of the Pops when that was on. So it doesn't really work on an audio format. But anyway, Simon, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And we'll see you soon. This episode is brought to you by executive producers Gary West, Fergus Higginson, Keith Foster, Jimmy Fletcher, Mark Drakes, Matt Cunnington, Christian Dees, Andy Elliott, Chris Hopkins, Omar Zambon, Ian Madrell, Catherine Lowe, Mark Makin, Zoltan Vargo, Simon Smith, and Matt Lee, and associate producer Chris Oakley. Visit www.patreon.com patreon.com/Betamax Video Club for more information about bonus episodes, early access and more. Those signing up now will find the first bonus episode, The Hunt for Red October. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and subscribe and tell all your friends.